Good morning, Revolution, everyone, and welcome to our show this week. Happy Black History Month. Today on the show, we will be discussing the situation as it's unfolding in Palestine and in the United States with the struggle for the ceasefire. We will also be touching base with Chicago and New York on the struggle for the democratic control of the police. And we will also be touching on a cultural topic which I hope everybody on the show is ready to dive into. The MAGA right versus Taylor Swift, who I guess is the most famous woman in the English-speaking world right now, or at least in the United States. But we'll get into that at the end of the show. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this week, Eric. It's nice to see you again. Okay.
Hi, everybody.
So anyway, let's start off by recognizing the fact that today is the second day of Black History Month. And we want to honor all of our African-American heroes within the party and within the broader progressive movement in the United States. The African-American community has been at the forefront of almost, I guess, basically all struggles for workers' rights in this country. And so this is a good month to revisit that. It was 64 years ago, on February 1st, 1960, that 4 HBCU students in Greensboro, North Carolina, decided to do a sit-in at a Woolworth's lunch counter. And I always think it's a good idea to remind folks that my mother was 10 years old when that happened. But before we start on the rest of the agenda, I kind of wanted to go around and ask the panelists, why is Black history important? Who would like to go first?
I'll take it.
Eric.
Oh,
Eric.
Go
ahead,
Eric.
I'm looking forward to Anita, her comments, but I would say Black history is important now, more important than it's ever been in the past because of the attack on teaching Black history, the attack on recognition of the contributions of Black people, and the ongoing right-wing attack on anything that recognizes the contributions of Black people to the United States history. But it's part also of an ongoing attack on providing for the needs of the Black community and all working class communities. And so the struggles today are really interrelated. You cannot talk about recognizing the Black contribution to the United States without at the same time talking about the need for peace and to take the money from the swollen imperialist military budget and applying it to meet the needs of Black people in the United States, and all Black and brown, Asian, LGBTQ plus, and all working people, because the income inequality in the United States has gotten so obscene, and that obscene income inequality is in part based on the disunity of the working class around the question of race, and which makes it hard to organize as effectively as we might want. So we have to fight for that unity. We have to fight for the recognition of the Black contribution, and we have to keep fighting for a united front against racism and for peace. Thanks.
Great answer. Yeah, thanks for starting us off with that. All right, go ahead, Anita.
Well, I really like what Eric had to say too. I mean, African American struggles throughout the history of the United States have been African American struggles are in the forefront of working class struggles, and I think you really can't separate them out. And teaching Black history or studying Black history has always been really controversial. And in fact, in Columbus, and we've studied the history of the Communist Party in Columbus, Ohio, and the Columbus organizers owned a bookstore in the 30s. And this bookstore is pretty much sold exclusively books from Carter Woodson's Center for African American History. Carter Woodson was the person who really invented Black History Week and then Black History Month. And those organizers really were targeted by the establishment. This was not a proper thing to be studying. Ultimately, one of them was fired from the history the Ohio History Center for his work with Black history. So, and of course, the controversies now that we see in Florida, there's just something revolutionary about teaching Black history because it is a history of resistance to capitalism and to patriarchy and to the structures of capitalism in this country. So it's just something that we have to keep that Black history alive. And I'm glad we had Black History Month and celebrate it every year. We should study it all year round.
Yeah, for sure. Rosanna, would you like to help us all
Sure,
understand why Black history is important?
sure. I don't know, some time ago, years ago, I interviewed a comrade Clara, who I think put it to me very clearly. And she says, Black History Month, I'm going to try to remember exactly how she said it. Black History Month is important because before that, Black people didn't exist. It was as if they were invisible. And that really struck me as very, very important, very clear. And we continue to see the attempts to put Black people in the foreground, in the background, as if they don't exist. And I agree with Anita. There is a force, and this is why there's this constant attempt on gerrymandering the votes. Uh, Attacks on the voting rights and attacks on all kinds of other things that affect Black people, as if, and the banning of books, all of those things, and then another attempt to make Black people invisible again. So this is really important, and we really should take it very, very seriously.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess the old cliche goes that those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And I think that there are so many lessons that everyone can learn today in how to apply ourselves to the anti-racist struggle, how that connects to our struggle for socialism. Happy Black History Month, everyone. So moving on in the agenda, we're going to move to the situation in Gaza. So in response to, well, first of all, thank you. We want to plug the ceasefire bulletin that cpusa.org is now publishing. I think it's on a weekly basis on the website. And you're able to go there and check out the bulletin and see where the struggle is unfolding in your area, whether that's on a municipal level or even on a global level. It's a good way to stay informed and also stay involved as to how the party is intervening in this struggle towards a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire, and a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. And this question has become even more intense over the last week. As we can see, the ICJ came out and said that it is the world's responsibility to prevent a genocide from taking place in Gaza, that there was reason to believe that Israel was engaging in genocidal acts in Gaza. And so it's the world's responsibility to try and stop that. However, I think it was almost the day after that this judgment dropped, there was suddenly an effort led by the United States and Israel to defund UNRWA. Now, UNRWA is a UN agency. It's the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Middle East. It employs 13,000 people in Gaza. So there are 13,000 families that are dependent on those wages. They've lost 154 UNRWA workers since the beginning of this latest slaughter in Gaza, since October 7th. And I just don't really, the Israelis said that it was because maybe 7 people had been involved in the October 7th attacks. But last time I checked, it didn't look like the United States government was planning on defunding Israel for its war crimes in Gaza. So there's a bit of a double standard here. Why is it that the panel thinks that they are taking this moment, this opportunity, right after the international community says, no, we have a responsibility to prevent genocide in Gaza, to basically say, well, you know what, we don't care about that. We're going to go ahead and cut off all aid through this very old and esteemed UN agency. What's with this timing right now?
Well, obviously, it's an attempt to sway the sentiment of the people to try to get people to stop putting pressure for a ceasefire, change the mindset. You know, it's an ideological battle, really. It's the kind of battle that the right wing always tries to wage to sway people to the other side, saying, "Oh my goodness, you know, 12 people were involved. Oh, okay, you know, then we have to be against it." But in reality, you're not looking at things deeper. 12 people are going to affect 2 million people's and suffering. That's ridiculous. So it's clearly an
Hmm.
attempt to. They haven't even proved it, and countries are pulling out. That's ridiculous. It's really an attempt to stop the funding once again, another form of genocide, and sway the people's sentiment in thinking that, oh, we couldn't possibly support this. But we have to look at the numbers. We have to look deeper into some of these comments and these news stories. They haven't even proven that that's true or not. They're just putting it
Hmm.
out there, and people are falling for it. We can't allow ourselves to fall prey to information without any proof and without looking at things in a deeper way before we fall in line to what they're trying to make us believe.
Yeah, 100%. Eric, why do you think it is? So I noticed that the Biden campaign sent, I guess, like the campaign director out to Michigan last week, and she was basically snubbed by the entire Arab American community, the entire Muslim American community in Michigan. And I'm just shocked that since Joe Biden only won this state by, what is it, 154,188 votes, that they think that this defunding of UNRWA would somehow help them in Michigan. What do you think is Biden's strategy here for winning Michigan if he's going to do something like take food out of the mouths of 2 million people in Gaza?
You're asking the wrong person that question because I have no clue what Biden is thinking about. There's lots, so it has to be understood that there's a large um, Arab population in Michigan, and so that community, just like African American communities in other states, is vital to electoral victory in that state in the upcoming presidential election. Biden is alienating himself from the black community and from the Palestinian community and from the Arab community. And it should be really brought home that Palestinians are not all Muslims, that there is a large Catholic and Christian component among the Palestinian peoples. And that was exhibited at the summit, the Gaza summit that was recently put on by Rainbow Push and others like the Arab American Institute. And it's important to understand that these two struggles are seen as very, very interrelated. And so Biden's uh, lack of addressing the terrorism of Israel because of fake concerns about terrorism is ridiculous. Not to stand here, not to say that we will defund Israel for their slaughter of unarmed children and women and men is uh, is inhuman. It's just there's no other way to say that. And the only way that we can address it, similarly to the only way that we can address the racism in this country, is through a large all people's movement that is going to come together, say no, say that we will not put up with this anymore, and stand firm. So the question from my mind is, how do we build that movement that
Hmm.
links these struggles and that is able to assert primacy over policy?
Right. Oh, for sure. Anita, I'm really impressed at how the stamina is still keeping up around this struggle for a ceasefire. For one, I know that lots of people are exhausted looking at their social media feeds and just this constant march of human misery that's coming out of Gaza. And with, Joe Biden making these moves to say, well, I'm going to sanction 4 people in the West Bank for being, settlers and being violent against Palestinians, that even though it seems as though there's been a lot to feel down about, people are still really going strong. And I wanted to draw your attention to what was going on this past week in Chicago, where the Chicago City Council actually came through on a remarkable win and passed a ceasefire agreement with, I think it was just one vote, right? And that was Brandon Johnson, the new
mayor.
mayor of Chicago. Yeah. Would you like to give us a little bit of perspective on this from
Sure.
Ohio?
Well, it was 23-23 on the city council, or whatever they call the council in Chicago. And Brandon Johnson, the mayor, gave the final vote. And he had come out for a ceasefire last week, so it was not a surprise, but that he was supporting it. It was a very contentious city council meeting, but I think we're seeing the ceasefire movement really take hold and really gain momentum. And I think another development that I think is really kind of exciting is that Rainbow Push and Jewish Voice for Peace, I think, and CARE and a number of other organizations have announced a pilgrimage that's going from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. over the week of February 14th to February 21st. And that is led by faith leaders of all faiths, basically. And I think Black pastors, in particular, are the movers and shakers behind that particular event. And that will be very dramatic, and I think it will really. It represents to me that we're not just doing the same demonstrations week after week after week, although those demonstrations pro-Palestine and for a ceasefire are going on, but people are thinking about creative new ways of putting pressure on our elected officials to call for a ceasefire. I know in Ohio we're targeting the Ohio treasurer and local county treasurers too to divest themselves of Israel bonds and question these special trade agreements. There's one between Dayton and Israel. So I think we're looking at creative new ways and to demonstrate our insistence on a ceasefire. And we're joined by people all over the world. And I think this momentum is going to grow. And I think Biden, even though there are 4 people that are sanctioned, those are people who have not even sanctioning all the settlers who have perpetrated violence against Palestinians, but only those who have perpetrated violence against Palestinian peace activists in particular.
Mhm.
So I think it's the beginning, and I hope the momentum keeps on growing.
Right. Yeah, because a lot of people, I'm seeing a lot of this online, Eric, where people are saying that like, oh, there's really no difference. They're both a genocide party, voting in this system doesn't matter and stuff. But I thought it was pretty remarkable that Brandon Johnson was the tiebreaker on this. What would you say to people who don't think that there's any avenue to success through the voting booth? What would you say to young people perhaps who have become, really cynical about this whole ordeal? Oh, you're muted, Eric.
That's a great question, and I'd say that cynicism is really misplaced today. There's a lot to be optimistic about. When you look at what happened in Chicago, Brandon Johnson swept into the mayorship, writing on the work of the National Alliance and unions and community groups to assert community control over the police. The assertion of community control over the police was uh, also being attacked by the police union, and recently they were trying to undermine. They were trying to undermine the community control of the police that was democratically voted in, with um, uh, asserting arbitration should resolve things. So democracy and the struggle for democracy is at the heart of struggles here in the United States. And um, when we look at Palestine, we can already see the results of the huge uprising that's taking place, because Biden doesn't want to move an inch. It was only because of the huge uprising of youth. There are 48 cities around the country that have already taken out pro peace, pro ceasefire resolutions. There are literally millions of people around the world that are calling out for a ceasefire. This has tremendous impact on the Democrats and the Democratic calculus as to can they get elected. And Democrats, they're not going to get elected without black people. They're not going to get elected
Hmm.
without Arabs. They're not going to get
Hmm.
elected without working class support. And the working class in this country today is saying ceasefire is required. So um, we as working people need to keep, and all people, it has to be an all people's front to demand this ceasefire. And we need to keep it up because it is starting to have an impact, even if it's slow and not what we
Hmm.
want. It is starting to have an impact, and it will have a huge impact on the elections. And at the same time as we can be critical of Biden, we have to also have a long term view, because we have to weigh under what conditions can we continue to fight um, most optimally. And if we look at Biden, and Biden is not a individual, he's a person who happens to have the leading role in a political party and in an administration. He is not an individual. He will respond to enough pressure, and
Right.
it's up to us to build that pressure and to keep fighting and to understand that if we vote for Trump, or if we don't vote, which is also a vote for Trump, that is going to undermine our ability to fight for ceasefire, and it will undermine our ability to fight for um, justice, and
Right.
here in the United States around police crime. Thanks.
Right. Well, I mean, I was just about to ask you because I think you had something to do with community control of the police in Chicago. I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of the same people who pushed so hard for community control of the police and who actually helped elect Brandon Johnson are also pro ceasefire. Is that correct?
Um, it is correct. Yes, absolutely.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's really a people's movement, and it's a
Hmm.
joined people's movement. It has to be approached that way. We are, as a people, we're tired of this. The question is, how do we organize to stop it? And the level of
Right.
organization has to go up.
Right. Well, congratulations to Chicago. Congratulations that, I don't know how Brandon Johnson feels personally in his heart about Palestine, but it's true. Politicians, they respond to pressure, they respond to power. And it seems as though the movement was able to take a pretty meaningful step forward in Chicago. And thank you for introducing the next topic on our agenda. We actually want to touch on New York as well, because there's also some issues at the city council level in New York around community control of the police, although it's a little bit different here. There was a bill recently that was before the city council called, I think it's the Why Did You Stop Act, or Count the Stops
Mhm.
Act, which
Oh,
also happened to make it illegal for solitary confinement in New York City jails. The How Many Stops Act, thank you. Because for some reason in New York City, the police and the Department of Corrections has given the middle finger to international humanitarian law, which says that solitary confinement is torture, and has still continued on. So the city council actually came out and passed this law saying that not only was solitary confinement no longer acceptable in New York City, but also that the NYPD would have to start taking records of every single stop that they make in the city, regardless. And Eric Adams actually vetoed that bill when it threw, but this week, actually, the city council went back, I think it was yesterday, and overrid his veto. And I think that that's a huge change in New York City governance. Rosanna, have you seen similar kinds of actions being taken at the municipal level in LA, for instance, at the city council level? I know there was a huge struggle around the city council last year. Do you think this is a good, viable route for activists who are trying to make change in their communities?
Oh,
Oh, you're muted,
muted.
Rosanna.
Solitary confinement has been proven to be torture, has been proven that any more than, I think, 15 days is detrimental to the person's mental health state. Uh, I, I, I don't recall, the struggles on solitary confinement here in detail, but I know that there have been several attempts here. California is a big prison state too. I forget how many prisons we've got here. It's a big moneymaker, really. um,
Mhm.
and so there is that struggle uh, going on to eliminate solitary confinement. I don't see the point in it, really. It's you just make the person even, create a worse situation for the person. It's not rehabilitation. It's really torture. So I don't recall any details here, but there definitely has been.
Mhm. Anita, do you see there being an increasing sort of connection between what's happening around the world and what's unfolding on the local level? I think that, the situation in Chicago and in Minneapolis last week is a good indication that building that people power on the ground can actually have like global effects, Are you all working on anything in Ohio right now around the police at that level?
I hope so. I mean, it was very frustrating. The George Floyd protests several years ago brought out many, many people onto the streets of Columbus, Ohio, in protest. And then before the year was out, another two young Black men had been gunned down by police. And today is the second day of the trial of one of those police officers, more than 2 years after he shot Casey Goodson Jr., a young, promising man who was entering his grandma's house with a bag of sandwiches in his hand, shot in the back by a sheriff's deputy. And the sheriff's deputy had bragged to his church how intolerant he was of juveniles of any sort, and just very clear that this person was not the right kind of person to be protecting the safety and the peace of communities. And I think that's what we have to do, is turn around and say, we need new institutions. I'm not I mean, I do like the slogan "defund the police." That rings true to me. But instead of that's a very unpopular slogan, I guess, with the masses. But I think we need new ways of making all people feel secure where they live. And I think we need more peacekeeping operations, and I think making sure people's human needs are attended to would be a big first step in reducing crime and making everybody's sense of security feel heightened.
Right. Well, and speaking of making sure that everybody feels welcome, I think we should move the agenda to Taylor Swift. I know maybe that's a bit of a jump from community control of the police, but at the same time, the struggle against the ultra right has a lot of different battlefields that we need to be active on. And so Taylor Swift, who I admit I don't know a ton about, I really am grateful to my friend Corinne for trying to, raise my awareness around Taylor Swift's political activity. She's dating one of the greatest football players right now, Travis Kelce, and she's been showing up to NFL games, and she's obviously very famous. But it seems as though she's become sort of a focus of the ultra right, of the MAGA right, and they seem to be hating on like the most popular young musician in the United States. And I just kind of wanted to do a quick, I guess, lightning round and ask folks on the panel, why do you think that MAGA has it out for Taylor Swift? This is very concerning to me. Obviously she's got a history of encouraging people to vote. She's pro-LGBTQ, and she's pro-women. Why is it that you think they're targeting her specifically in the run-up to the election? How
Well, they're
about we
trying to
start with
they're
Rosanna?
they're clearly trying to eliminate her power, her voice, even before. They're anticipating that she may, come out and people will listen to her because she is so popular, and they're anticipating that maybe she will come out to for people to be sure to go out and vote, and all of these kinds of will speak out. And so they're really trying to silence her voice. And we have to recognize these are right wing attempts to, to once again in the battle of ideas to influence people's thinking that way. And so they're anticipating this because they've already seen a trend by her, promoting voting rights and things like that, going out, getting out the vote, stuff like that. So they're trying to eliminate anyone that poses a threat, and clearly she poses a threat to them.
Yeah, I've been hearing that they're making up some really wild kind of like conspiracy theories about her, that they're saying that maybe the NFL and the Super Bowl is rigged because, she's dating Travis Kelce and she's pro, voting rights and stuff. Anita, what's going on with this? Why do they hate her so much?
Well, it's really kind of a pleasure to read these crazy theories. Like Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, was one that had the idea that that the game was rigged, and I guess there was all a plan to rig the game, and then they would have a World Series, and Kelsey's team would win, and then Taylor would come out and endorse Joe Biden. So I guess they're trying to decide what the Biden campaign should do next. But they just fear her because she's an independent, represents women, and I think she has a huge following among young women in particular. So I think and people have those parasocial kind of relationships with
Hmm.
the people that they love. So she's very influential. She could really influence. She has already influenced people to register to vote, and I think she could make a difference. And she endorsed Biden in 2020. There's no reason why she wouldn't do it this year as well. So maybe she
Right,
won't wait till the big game is over. The Super Bowl. Did I say World Series?
right.
I get my sports mixed up.
We
The
need to
World
get
Cup,
John back on.
the World
Yeah.
Cup of football.
Isn't that her right, though, Eric? Isn't it her right as a public figure to come out and endorse things like this? Isn't it her right to say, you should go register to vote? Isn't it her right to say, we should support women at the ballot box? Isn't it her right to say, we support LGBTQ rights? Why is it that there's this giant group of right wing, I gotta say, mainly men, who seem to feel entitled to her opinions? What's going on with that, Eric?
Well, we're seeing patriarchy in action, I think, but we're also seeing what the MAGA folks really stand for, which is not um, not democratic at all. It doesn't respect the individual. They always talk about the Constitution, but they actually don't respect the constitutional um, uh, protections for freedom of speech and things like that. And when you look at Taylor Swift, you look at somebody who is moving people to register to vote that might not otherwise register to vote. So there's an underlying question, which is why is it that the MAGA folks are so scared of people being registered to vote? And that gets to what is at the heart of their their struggle from the MAGA perspective, which is what does it mean to make America great again? It means to limit the vote, stop black people from voting, limit women's votes, limit the votes of people who are non-white or LGBTQ plus, and through those mechanisms of through those anti-democratic mechanisms to force a uh, force a presidency that would not otherwise, in a democratic way, come into being. So there is nothing democratic about MAGA. There's nothing anti-patriarchal about MAGA. They
Hmm.
they are totally against all forms of support for women. That includes health care, includes abortion access.
Right.
They're against education. I mean, it just is part of a larger package that is anti-democratic. And when they look at what Taylor Swift is doing, she's trying to mobilize people who are primarily working people to exercise their vote, and that is anti-MAGA in its essence.
Right. Yeah, as somebody who's who I guess I would be in Taylor Swift's demographic, a woman, a white woman from the South, um, in a heterosexual relationship, I think that there's something that gets under these freaks' skin when they see someone like her be in support of voting rights, when they see someone like her be in support of LGBTQ, when they see someone like her be anti-racist. I think that they are just absolutely, they hate women so much, and they hate that she has stepped out of what they want her to be in their mind. And so, hats off to you, Taylor Swift. Not, we don't like the MAGA hats, but
Not that bad.
other
Yeah.
metaphorical hats. So, but all right, so we're going to wrap up for today. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, happy Black History Month, everyone. Stay strong, stay safe, and stay in the fight. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye, comrades.
Bye.